It's not as difficult as you might think. Yes, there are plenty of obstacles, and yes, it's going to take a little time. We'll talk about time in a minute. That's not going to happen by the next election, is it? We're not talking about just getting one man elected. See, the average Americans, they want action, right? They don't want these long-term projects. Let's get it done now. Who are you going to vote for? That's the extent of it. They think if we could just get a Ron Paul or somebody else who we think is a good guy elected to the President of the United States, then everything will change. In spite of the fact that the media remains in the hands of the collectivists, all the bureaucrats remain in the hands of the collectivists, the military remains, the State Department remains, the banking system remains, the unions remain, the Teachers Association remain, the schools, everything. None of that changes, but if we get one man in the White House, that'll change everything. No. Silly. It's a long-range plan. We've got to change the whole society, one organization at a time, one power center at a time. But that's the strategy of Freedom Force. We know it can be done because our enemies have done it. Now, it's true, our enemies have a lot of money. A lot more than we'll ever have. I mean, they make the bloody stuff. We can never do that. But we have something they do not, and they envy us and fear us for that. We are on, literally, the side of right, the light side. They're on the dark side. They have to have unlimited sources of money because they rely on deceit, bribery, treachery, murder. They appeal to all of the evil instincts of men. Pretty effective, by the way, but that's what they have to deal with. There are many, many people caught up in the mechanism which they control who want out. They would love to get out if they thought they could. When that system falls, I think it'll fall very quickly because of that fact. Very quickly. Right now they're staying in because they don't see any option. On the other hand, our movement is built upon integrity, honesty, facts, truth. You don't have to bribe anybody to work for freedom or for independence, for their family, for their children. You don't have to blackmail them. You don't have to threaten them. You don't have to assassinate anybody. And so all of the best aspects of human nature are on our side, and our enemy doesn't have any of that. And they envy us for that. We are growing rapidly in spite of the tremendous power that they hold, and they're doing everything possible to prevent us. Freedom Force right now has members in 68 countries. The problem we face, this thing called collectivism, is universal. It's in every land of the world. In fact, it's easier for people in some countries to see it than Americans, because they've lived through it. In almost every meeting I go to, it didn't happen in this particular one, but all of the other previous seminars so far, I've run into a couple of people who were refugees from former communist countries. They were raised on it. And they told me that the story's the same. We came here thinking that freedom was here. And now that we're here, we see the same thing happening under different labels. The flag is different. The language is different, the customs are different, but the political concepts remain the same, and they can see it because they lived under it full-blown, which is why they came here. The Americans have never seen it, so they're ripe for it. They're ripe for this. They're falling for all the slogans and all the, the trickery. Well, so it's easier in many countries for people to see this clash between individualism and collectivism than it is for many Americans. But back to the main point, our goal is to come to power. And we must do that, and we can do that, if we wish to turn our system around. I don't think we can rely on military means. I don't think we can rely on revolution, although that's always a last resort. But I believe that if we had enough public support and enough understanding to bring all the states in line so they could challenge the federal government and say, we are once again declaring our sovereignty, and we're not going to go along with these dictates from Washington, and if you don't like it, we'll meet you on the battlefield. If we had enough states that would take that stance, we would never have to meet them at the battlefield, because that means there'd be already a groundswell of demand and popular opinion among the American people before that would happen, that Washington would already be cleaned out. Would happen at the same time, you see. It's not a question of either or, it's a question of both at the same time. Which is why I like the idea of going for states' rights, because at the same time, we're challenging the federal government. And at the same time, we have slogans and issues that we can use to change those nameplates, not only at the state level, but in Washington as well. It takes us eventually to the question, well, all right, if we do succeed in all this, then those of us who have been in the forefront of this movement may actually wind up holding some real political power. So how do we prevent that from corrupting us and those who follow us? The answer is to be found in the little dissertation that I gave earlier on the differences between individualism and collectivism, and in particular with a discussion of the difference between government and a protectorate. I believe that if everybody who comes to power under this freedom banner has an idea, a central idea, a creed, a statement of their belief, that supported the concept of a protectorate and not a government, that simple fact alone would mean that the state would have to revert back to a condition in which it did not have the authority or the power to do anything other than to protect the lives, liberty, and property of its citizens. And if that were in fact brought about, there would be no opportunity for power to corrupt anybody. Why would any crook go into government if they couldn't do anything except protect the people? There's nothing in it for him. What makes it interesting for all the predators is where they can go in and pretend to be good guys and take from this group and give it to that group and rake off some in the process. That's where the predators get involved. It's because government takes on this positive, or I should say the state, there I did it again, because the state takes on the positive aspect, and that opens the door to all of the criminality. So if everybody in this movement was focused clearly on the negative function of government, and if they followed through on that, and it's up to us to make sure that they do, then this temptation of corruption would gradually and perhaps quickly just disappear from the scene. On top of that, of course, we would need a watchdog structure, a watchdog organization on the outside of government, which would watch these people like a hawk and make sure that they stick to the creed, they stick to the principles that they campaigned on. They stick to the very ideals that they used to gather support from the freedom movement. There has to be an organization outside of government that is a watchdog, and I believe that's where Freedom Force will play its historic role in the long haul ahead. If my assumptions are correct on all of these things, then the only thing left is, what is the creed? What do we believe in? And so, in the year 2002, I sat down and I thought this was going to be an impossible task, and it started off to be an impossible task. So I'll tell you why. I said, I've got to write this creed. I'm through talking about it. I've been saying, we ought to have a creed. We ought to know what we stand for as well as what we're against and all that sort of thing. And I finally said one day, okay, well then, do the creed. What do we believe in? So I started off like many people would, logically. I started to write a political party platform. We stand for this, we're opposed to that, we're in favor of this measure and that measure, and this issue, here's where we stand, and pull our troops out, and we'll send this, and we won't reduce, eliminate the income tax, all these things. My gosh, my list kept growing and growing and growing and growing. I said, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong track. I was dealing with issues. Where are the principles? thought, oh, I see what I'm doing. I'm playing the political game. I'm dealing with issues. Why don't we just talk about principles? If we can get clear on the principles, then